Official images of one of the most anticipated upcoming Transformers figures have finally been released, Studio Series 86 Megatron, and today I'm going to give you my first impressions of this exciting figure, and I'm even going to share some initial comparisons to other releases of Megatron on this brand new segment of Heroic Nonsense. Let's go. I've been anxiously awaiting these official images for a while now, as I know many of you also have. And thanks to my good buddy Zazel over at Zazel Clubhouse, go and check out his awesome website, I'll post a link. I decided to go ahead and put together an episode to share my first thoughts on this monumental, soon-to-be-released Studio Series figure based off of the 1986 Megatron design, at least from a robot mode perspective. Now, I know a lot of people are disappointed about the fact that 86 Megatron doesn't transform into his traditional Walther P-38 and instead transforms into an Earth-based tank. We won't get too deep into that controversy in this video though. Instead, I'll simply state that while this change might be disappointing to some, although entirely expected, we are finally getting a 1986 version of the figure that in my opinion really captures the essence and look of the 1986 Megatron. With mostly clean parts from what I can see with no gaps, Megatron sports his characteristic scowl and a very accurately designed head sculpt. His arm cannon looks right on target and appropriately imposing, and his body displays all the toy and cartoon design elements we've come to know and love, including the colorful waist engravings and barrel attached to his right shoulder. Overall, the gray coloring looks great, though difficult to make out what the final color of the lower legs will be, but it does appear to be the darker shade used in the movie. So we're going to do a few high-level initial comparisons in this episode based off of the official Studio Series 86 Megatron images, and we'll start with, in my opinion, the definitive version of Megatron, MP36 from the Masterpiece line, given that the bot mode is really nicely designed and the fact that it transforms into a Walther P-38, which is therefore true to form. I have to say though that I might be liking the Studio Series version a bit better in bot mode, with the chunkier legs and feet and the more tune-accurate upper body. I do prefer the arms on MP36 Megatron, however, given the smoother arms without ports, and find the head sculpt a bit more aesthetically pleasing. Don't forget, these are simply my initial opinions based off of the released images. In this image, we'll look at two different versions of Megatron, both having tank modes. Starting with Megatron from the War for Cybertron line, one of the versions that transforms into the Cybertronian tank mode, as I decided against getting the Earth-based mode. I think they both look really good, each having its own time and place. From the front at least, both versions look like what you'd expect Megatron to look like with no real indication that he transforms into a tank. However, seeing these two next to each other, I think the Studio Series version just looks that much more premium and basically is a mini masterpiece looking bot. The difference is even greater between SS86 Megatron and Transformers Generations Combiner Wars Megatron, which was a very cool version of Megatron for the time, and big. Now I'd have to say in this case, this version of Megatron is more a reimagining of Megatron in tank form, rather than a toy that was trying to replicate the original toy and cartoon version note for note. No real comparison here in bot mode, SS86 wins by a long shot. But it is interesting to again see the main characteristic elements of Megatron being reproduced, and the premium finish of this bot. Also cool to see how the legs try to replicate the sleeker, thinner version of Megatron from his P-38 days. Main reason I'm including him though is for the part where we'll review the tank mode. A quick shot here of Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime so you can get a feel of how these 1986 movie versions compare, and I have to say, they both have that 86 cartoon style down pat and pair up nicely. Of course, once we have Studio Series 86 Megatron in hand, we'll do a much more detailed comparison and review of these guys and much more. But for now, I always like to get an idea in advance of how a new figure will ultimately scale and look with the rest of our collection. Takara has also released a back image of Megatron, and overall I'm pretty satisfied. Let's start with the good, that being the fairly clean design and not too bulky back portion, minus the top part that appears to fold out, and the rounded joints on the lower back, which at least to some extent appear to be movie accurate. The energy sword, which by the way is a nice addition to the figure, and which briefly appeared during the defining battle between Megatron and Optimus, as well as a Mini-Megatron Laser, can both attach to his back, though I suspect most won't keep these here. I do wonder if the laser portion of the sword can separate from the hilt to give it a non-extended version. As for the rest of the design, the only part I think that sticks out for me are the treads and some kibble on the lower legs, which obviously weren't there on the original or the cartoon, but are a necessary evil. Looking at some other Megatron images online though, that lighter gray wing looking piece is accurate to the movie, at least that shape and color. I also feel that they have a bit more detailing on the arms from this angle than the smoother look from the cartoon, but doesn't appear to be too overt and does replicate some of the movie detailing. Comparing once again to Masterpiece MP36 Megatron, you can see a lot of the same shared elements, including that wing-shaped leg piece, the side hip covers, and the barrel. MP36 does indeed have the smoother, more tune-accurate finish, I'd say, and is a bit sleeker overall, though SS86 Megatron definitely wins on the upper back kibble portion, with it being a lot more integrated. Some of the grooves on the lower side of the leg that would have been part of the handle from the original toy are also included on both, with MP36 being the more prominent of the two. Really appears to me that, like SS86 Optimus and Kingdom Rodimus Prime, this figure is going to be a mini masterpiece with apparently 54 steps of transformation. As for Combiner Wars Megatron and War for Cybertron Megatron, Studio Series 86 also takes the win with the back kibble, versus the other two being way more prominent and the designs missing a lot more of the iconic elements of Megatron, including some very specific red paint on the sides. Now onto the more sensitive topic of the alt mode design. Aside from Megatron not being a Walther P38, the tank mode to my relief actually looks like a fairly accurate Earth-based version of a tank. I can't tell how small or large it is from the image, though it appears to be a bit compact, but overall I really like it. My favorite parts being the sides and treads, as well as the front portion. I think they did the best they could with the turret given how much more important it was to get the bot mode right, but it's truly not that off. The slope back is a bit interesting, but I do really appreciate how smooth it is, though perhaps it would have been nicer to have the back form one cohesive unit like the front and sides. I won't share Megatron's P38 alt mode in this first impressions video, as I'll be saving that for my main review where we'll also get to see MP5 Megatron, but I wanted to start here with the gold standard for Megatron tanks in my opinion, at least until I see SS86 in hand, that being Combiner Wars Megatron. I still think this tank mode holds up extremely well after all these years, with that very nice looking turret and the mostly cohesive frame minus the back. It's a bit of a futuristic design, but it still feels like a modern day tank. Looking at Studio Series 86 Megatron's tank mode, it seems like the design is a bit dated, though I think it works given that it's supposed to represent the alt version of an 80s timeline character. What I would have loved on SS86 Megatron, and something sorely missing from our collection since CW Megatron's release, is a Megatron with working tank treads. That would have been perfection, but really didn't expect it. At least they look realistic. Anyway, it will definitely be interesting to compare these two guys once I have SS86 Megatron in hand. This shot is more of a fun one, just to get an initial scale and visual comparison to some other tanks from the recent lines, this time using the recent Legacy United Overcharge based off of the Legacy Blitzwing design, and Megatron's War for Cybertron Cybertronian design. While the WFC Megatron design is way off, and meant to be so, I do think from these shots that I took of Overcharge that both tanks, and by extension Blitzwing, will look great together. Still no real idea of scale until he's in hand, but I feel like they will line up nicely. I can see why they decided to showcase this view of Studio Series 86 Megatron, and that's because it looks fantastic as far as tanks go. A bit bulky again at top for the turret, but my overall impression is that this is a very accurate Earth-based tank design. The cannon also looks appropriately menacing, with the option of attaching Mini-Megatron. As for the sword, it looks fine attached there, but again, likely not going to be used that way often, at least in our displays. Hopefully there's another spot where we can hide it. Again, my gold standard design of Combiner Wars Megatron to date. Most of the tank from this angle looks 100% perfect, and I wish the arms of Studio Series 86 Megatron could have been designed to be more sleek like CW Megatrons, though I recognize that this would have likely meant less accurate bot arms, as is the case for CW Megatron. All three look like they line up nicely, but as far as color goes, Studio Series Megatron and Overcharge are my top picks, and I think will look incredible when displayed together. I have to say that Overcharge and Blitzwing's turret is perfect, and wish Megatron had that look. Though as you may know, their turrets just hang off of their backs as is, and is therefore so much easier to have a realistic design when in tank mode. Let's end this first impressions episode of Studio Series 86 Megatron off with a quick look at the Mini-Megatron gun accessory that can be held by similar scale figures across the various lines, in this case using the recent Seeker molds, and I love that we can actually have a version of Megatron in this mode for these toys to hold. I wonder though if it will have the extension, though I suspect it won't. For a bit of a workaround, at least in the meantime, you can always grab the Mini-Megatron that comes with Blocky's Galaxy version 2 Starscream, which is what I did here. It doesn't slot in perfectly, but it can be held properly with the extender slotted into the bottom of the weapon. So that's it guys, hope you enjoyed this new series and my first impressions of Studio Series 86 Megatron. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Transform!